Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know where you are from. Also, what time is it? Most people driving late at night keep their eyes on the road, but if you're ever heading down Highway 46 past midnight, especially near mile marker 43, don't look to the side. Don't look at the woods. And whatever you do, if you see someone waving you down on that stretch, don't stop. No matter how real they look, how desperate they seem, no matter how human they appear. Ask anyone from the neighboring towns, and they'll tell you that highway is cursed. Not the kind of curse you laugh about or make up to scare kids. The kind that keeps towing companies busy and leaves sheriff reports half finished because deputies refuse to go back. The kind where entire cars go missing. Not wrecked. Not abandoned. Just gone. It was 2:13 a.m. when Paul Mercer's pickup rolled past the faded green sign for mile marker 42. His fingers tapped the steering wheel in rhythm with the worn-out FM radio static. The road was empty. No taillights ahead, no headlights behind. Just the occasional flicker of trees passing on either side, caught in the beam of his high beams. Paul had driven this road more times than he could count, hauling scrap, making late night deliveries, but tonight felt off. The air in the cab was cold, even though his heater was on. Not chilly cold, like someone had opened a window that wasn't there. He turned the heat up a notch and kept driving, though a weird heaviness was settling in his chest. The kind that creeps in without warning and makes you check your mirrors more than usual. But they were empty, just like the road. As he passed mile marker 43, his headlights caught something in the distance, just for a second. A person, standing by the side of the road. At first, he thought it was a woman. She was wearing white, barefoot, long hair hiding her face. She stood motionless, arms limp at her sides. Paul's foot hovered over the brake, instincts battling. She looked lost, maybe hurt. It would be inhuman to keep driving. But something about her didn't sit right. As his truck neared, she raised one arm slowly, palm out. A silent plea. Her face still hidden. And that's when his radio went dead. The static cut out like someone flipped a switch. Silence dropped in the cab like a thick blanket. Paul's skin crawled. He eased his foot off the brake. Nope, not tonight. He kept driving. In the rearview mirror, she didn't move. Just stood there, arms still raised, until she vanished in the dark. He thought about turning around, just for a second. But then he remembered the story. A year ago, a guy from Ransomville, an EMT named Jeff Carter, stopped for someone at that exact spot. He called it in. Claimed a girl in white was staggering on the side of the road. He never made it to the hospital he was heading to. His ambulance was found 10 miles away, empty, doors wide open, engine still running. Jeff was never seen again. Paul never believed that story. Not until now. He flipped the radio off. No point in fighting the dead signal. The quiet buzz of tires on asphalt filled the void. But then the silence broke. Not from the radio, from the passenger seat. A breath, soft, shaky, like someone trying not to cry. Paul didn't look. Couldn't. His pulse surged. His grip tightened on the wheel until his knuckles ached. Eyes locked forward, he whispered to himself, "Don't look. Just keep driving." The breath came again. Closer this time. He could feel the weight of another presence in the truck, though the seat looked empty just minutes ago. The air had gone colder. His windows fogged slightly. Another whisper, this time words. "Why didn't you stop?" A woman's voice, right beside him. Paul slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed, screeching on the pavement, headlights swinging wildly. He twisted the wheel, trying to regain control, tires biting into the shoulder. And then, darkness. Everything went black. When he came to, he was still in the truck, parked sideways across the road. Engine dead. Lights off. No sign of life around him. His watch blinked 2:44 a.m. Half an hour had passed, but he didn't remember stopping. Didn't remember turning the engine off. Didn't remember pulling over. His hands were shaking. He reached for his phone. No signal. Of course, he tried the ignition. Click, click. Nothing. Paul got out, boots crunching on gravel. The woods on either side were too quiet. Not even the wind moved the leaves. No insects. No birds. Just silence. Then he saw it. Another mile marker just ahead. He walked closer. Mile 43. Again. No, that wasn't right. He'd already passed it. He'd gone almost 2 miles past it before the woman appeared. But now he was right back where she stood. He backed away. Fast. But there was no road behind him. Just trees. The highway. Gone. The lines, the pavement, even his own truck. Gone, only trees. Paul turned in a slow circle, heart pounding so loud he thought it might burst. He wasn't on the road anymore. He was in the woods. Thick, dense, and dark. That's when he saw the others, people. Scattered between the trees. Some just shadows, unmoving. Some facing away from him, heads tilted. And one, just one, stood right in front of him. It was her. The woman in white. Now he could see her face. Empty eye sockets. A wide smile cut too deep across pale skin. She stepped forward. Paul turned to run. But his feet wouldn't move. Like the forest had grabbed hold of his legs. His breath to fog, even though the air was still. The shadows around him moved closer. And then, headlights. A horn blared in the distance. Suddenly Paul was back, behind the wheel. Truck running. On the road. Radio humming again with static. Mile marker 43 was behind him. He didn't remember starting the engine, or shifting gears, or turning the wheel, but he wasn't going to question it. He floored the gas and didn't stop until he saw a gas station glowing in the distance. Paul pulled in, skidding to a stop near the pumps. He stumbled out, eyes wild, breath ragged. The clerk inside watched him approach the door and backed away slowly, like he'd seen something like this before. Another one from the road. The clerk muttered, locking the door before Paul could step inside. Paul pounded on the glass. "Let me in." The clerk shook his head. "Not till the clock hits 3:33. Can't open the door until then. Not safe." Paul stared at him. You knew. You knew what was out there. The clerk's eyes darted to the wall-mounted clock. 3:28 a.m. "Did you stop for her?" he asked. Paul didn't answer. "You're lucky if you didn't," the clerk said. "But it's not over. Not yet." "What do you mean?" Paul asked. The clerk nodded toward the pumps. "Look at your truck." Paul turned. The cab was empty, but the passenger door was wide open. Paul stood frozen, staring at the open passenger door of his truck like it might lurch forward and bite him. The cab light cast a dull glow across the empty seat, flickering slightly, like it wasn't sure whether to stay on or give up entirely. The gas station behind him buzzed with dying fluorescent lights. Inside, the clerk still stood by the locked door, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the clock. 3:30 a.m. Paul's breath fogged in the cool night air. It was April. It shouldn't be this cold. He closed the passenger door carefully, slowly, like a kid trying not to wake something sleeping. Then he climbed back into the truck. The air inside smelled different now. Not the usual combo of grease, sweat, and cheap pine, scented air freshener. It smelled old, like rotting leaves, damp wood, earth that had been undisturbed for far too long. Paul turned the heater off. It wasn't helping anyway. He kept one eye on the gas station door as the minute hand inched forward. 3:32. Come on, come on. And then the door unlocked with a dull click. The clerk motioned him in with a quick nod. Paul didn't wait. He got out and rushed inside, practically slamming into the counter. "You knew," he said. "You knew something was out there." The clerk didn't argue. "You see her?" Paul nodded. She was on the side of the road, waving. "I didn't stop." "Good. But she got in anyway." Paul's jaw clenched. "Yeah." The clerk exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding that breath a long time. "That happens sometimes. The real dangerous ones don't need your permission. They just need your attention." Paul leaned on the counter. What the hell is she? Not sure, the clerk said. But she's older than this place, older than the highway. My grandfather used to talk about her, said she was already there when the road was still dirt and wagon wheels. You believe all that? Paul asked. I didn't. Not until I saw her, 2 years back. Same spot. Mile 43. My cousin was driving me home after a night shift. We saw her too. I told him to keep going, but he pulled over. What happened? Ho blinked, and she was gone. Not on the road. Not in the mirror. We thought it was over. But 3 days later, he walked into the woods behind his house and didn't come back. Paul felt something tighten in his gut. She got him later, he asked. The clerk nodded. They say she doesn't always kill you on the road. Sometimes she waits, follows, rides with you for a while, stays close. Close enough to whisper in your ear while you sleep. Paul swallowed hard. How do you get rid of her? You don't. Then what do I do? The clerk glanced at the truck through the window. You drove through it, right? The loop? Paul frowned. What loop? You passed mile marker 43, then wound up back at it. Yeah, that's the start of it. She gets in then. You'll drive the same stretch again soon. Different each time. And if you make it out 3 times, they say she lets go. Paul looked toward the door. 3 times. Some don't make it past one, the clerk said. What happens if you stop in the loop? No one knows. They never come back to talk about it. A heavy silence hung between them. Paul finally asked, You got a name? The clerk offered a faint grin. Name's Manny. I'll be here if you make it back. But don't come looking for help after 3:33. Doors stay locked for a reason. Paul looked at the clock. 3:34. He left without another word. The truck rumbled back to life on the first try. That alone was unsettling. After everything, the damn thing still purred like nothing happened. He didn't look at the passenger seat. Didn't need to. He could feel her. Close. Watching. Waiting. As he pulled back onto the road, something caught his eye in the mirror. Not her reflection. His. But wrong. Off. His face looked pale. Lips slightly parted. Eyes wide and glassy. Like he wasn't driving but just sitting there, watching himself. He blinked. The reflection blinked too, but it lagged, just by a second. Then it caught up, then smiled. Paul whipped his eyes back to the road. Mile marker 42. Again, the radio flickered. A soft static returned. But underneath it something else, a voice. Faint. I see you. Paul's hands tightened on the wheel. His knuckles white, jaw locked. He passed mile marker 43, and this time it wasn't a woman. It was a little boy, standing in the middle of the road, blood on his face, grinning, his eyes hollow. Paul didn't break, didn't flinch. He drove straight through. There was no thud, no impact. Just a cold gust that blew through the cab and out the vents. Then silence. He checked the mirror. No one there. But a small handprint appeared on the glass inside the windshield. Small, wet, red. He didn't wipe it away. He didn't dare. Instead, he drove, mile after mile, until the trees started to blur and the road felt like it was unraveling beneath him. And then, blackness again. A blink. Gone. The road vanished, replaced by rows of rusted-out cars, wreckage half buried in the dirt. Faded road signs pointed in every direction at once. And among the wrecks, people. Some sitting in the drivers' seats, long dead. Some walking endlessly down broken yellow lines that never ended. Some just staring at Paul. He couldn't stop the truck. Couldn't slow down. He was moving through a dead place, and every second he spent there, he could feel her again. Closer, almost in the seat now, breathing with him. Then, light, a flash. The gas station again, he was back. Just like that, parked in the same spot. Manny stood inside, same place, same stance. But this time he didn't look surprised. Paul stepped out, legs shaking. Manny unlocked the door. You made it through the first loop, he said. That's rare. Paul sat on the curb, face in his hands. "I saw a kid. And others. Dead ones." Manny nodded. "They're stuck in the loops. Didn't make it. Pieces of them get left behind." "I don't want to do this again," Paul said. "You will?" "Why?" "Because you looked at her. That's all it takes." Paul didn't respond. He didn't need to. He already knew. The second loop was coming. And next time, she might not ride silently. Paul didn't sleep. Not really. He'd sat in the driver's seat until the sun came up, staring at the horizon like it might blink and disappear again. The truck never turned off. He didn't trust it to start if it did. Manny came out around 7 a.m., carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Paul and lit a cigarette. "She's quiet in the daylight," he said. "But she's still with you. You feel it." Paul nodded. He didn't even taste the coffee. Just held it for the heat. "I can't live like this," he said. "Knowing she's waiting. Knowing the road's gonna open again." "You only have to make it through 2 more loops," Manny said. "And if I don't?" "Then you join them." Paul didn't ask who them was. He already knew. Manny stared off at the highway. "Sun'll go down in 12 hours. You should leave before then." "Why?" "Because if you're not driving when it starts again, she might take you somewhere worse." Paul didn't go home. There was no point. If this was going to happen, he'd rather be ready than surprised, so he drove. Miles away from the town, away from mile marker 43. By the time the sun dipped behind the hills, he was 200 miles east, in a dusty rest stop surrounded by nothing but dry fields and chain link fences. He watched the clock tick to 3:00 a.m. again. Then the wind started. It came from nowhere, hot and full of grit. Dust swirled across the asphalt. The air turned heavy, like the sky was leaning in. Paul stood by his truck, one hand on the door. 3:13. He blinked. The rest stop was gone. Just like that, now he was parked on the side of the highway again. Same position. Same smell in the air. Old rot. Like something wet was hiding just beneath the gravel. Mile 43 was just ahead. He didn't touch the steering wheel. Didn't even move. But the truck began rolling forward on its own. Slow. Deliberate. Paul slammed the brake. Nothing. He shifted into park. Still rolling. Faster now. The trees on either side looked unfamiliar. Too tall. Too black. Like they weren't growing from the ground, but dangling from above. Rootless. Then, she was there again. Standing in the middle of the road. Not waving this time. Not smiling. Just watching. Face obscured by matted black hair. Head tilted slightly, like a curious dog, and behind her more. Figures. Dozens of them, lining the edges of the road. Silhouettes with hollow faces, limbs too long, some crawling, some swaying. Paul stared straight ahead. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. They didn't move. Until the truck stopped. Dead in front of her. Paul's heart thudded like a hammer. He locked the doors, even though deep down, he knew that wouldn't matter. The cab went ice cold. His breath fogged the windshield. A whisper tickled his ear, low and broken. "Let me drive." Paul clenched his jaw. "No." The whisper came again, closer this time. From inside his head, "Let me in." He turned his head. She was in the back seat. No sound. No movement. Just there. Hair hanging like dripping vines, head pressed against the side window. Breathing fog on the glass. Paul threw the truck into reverse. The engine screamed, tires spun, and he shot backward fast. Too fast. The road behind him twisted and warped, pulling away like a funhouse mirror. The trees bent toward him, their branches clawing the truck like fingers. He saw one of the figures in the forest lunge for the door. Thud. It hit the side mirror and disappeared into shadow. Paul slammed the wheel left. The truck veered, spun, skidded, and suddenly he wasn't on pavement anymore. He was in a tunnel, made of bone. The walls curved inward, lined with rib like arches. The headlights flickered and dimmed. The sound of the tires turned wet, sloppy, like he was driving through blood. Ahead, a red light blinked, and beneath it, her again. But this time, her head was upside down, hanging low, arms stretched wide, floating off the ground. Paul closed his eyes. "This isn't real," he whispered. But the voice that answered wasn't his. It was hers, whispering from the speakers, from the vents, from under his seat. "You let me ride, now let me drive." The truck jolted forward like something shoved it. Paul opened his eyes, just in time to see the tunnel collapse behind him. The walls caved inward, sending clouds of bone, dust swirling into the cab. He gasped and choked, not on air, but water. Freezing, black water poured through the vents, flooding the floorboard. His boots were soaked in seconds. He reached to open the door. It wouldn't budge. The passenger window rolled down on its own. And from outside, long pale arms reached in, pulling, dragging something with them. Not her, not the woman, a face Paul recognized, his own dead. Waterlogged, eyes open, staring, mouth moving. "You're almost done," it said. Then everything went dark. He woke up back in his driveway. Morning, birds chirping. His phone buzzed on the dashboard. 3:34 a.m. it read, even though the sun was up, even though time should have moved on. Paul checked the mirror. No one in the back seat, no handprints. But when he looked at himself, his reflection wasn't blinking. It stared at him. Then slowly, grinned. Paul didn't sleep this time either. He sat on his porch for hours, the sun rising and falling in the sky like someone was skipping through time. Birds chirped, then fell silent. The wind turned thick, oily. His coffee went cold in his hands, untouched. Every few minutes, he checked the driveway to make sure the truck was still there, that it hadn't rolled off on its own again, that she wasn't behind the wheel. At 3:00 a.m., exactly, he walked outside. The stars were gone, not hidden behind clouds, just gone. The sky above was a blank, empty slate, dark and smooth like a polished slab of obsidian. He could feel it pressing down on him, watching him. The truck was still there, but the inside was dark, like the shadows didn't want the light to reach in, like it didn't want to be seen. Paul opened the driver's door. The dome light didn't come on. He sat down, tried to breathe, tried to remind himself one more night, one more loop. He turned the key. The engine didn't start. Instead, the radio came on, full volume, screaming static. Then, "Are you still in control?" Not a voice, not exactly, more like a thought spoken aloud, one he shouldn't be able to hear. Paul stared at the radio. "Not tonight," he whispered. "You don't get me tonight?" Silence. Then, the passenger door clicked open. Slowly, smoothly, like someone invited themselves in. He didn't look. Didn't need to. He felt her. The weight in the seat. The smell. Wet leaves, stagnant water, old blood. Her breathing was quiet, but it rattled the air. Paul gripped the wheel with white knuckles and drove. The road was different this time. Too perfect. No cracks, no bumps, no landmarks. Just 2 yellow lines in infinite black. He passed mile marker 43 5 times in 10 minutes. No turns, no exits. The woman in the passenger seat never spoke, never moved, just stared forward. Then she whispered, "Turn here." There was no turn, just more road. "Turn here." Paul kept going. To Uaran. The steering wheel jerked left on its own. He fought it, sweating, muscles straining. But the truck obeyed her. It left the highway like it was being yanked by an unseen chain, tires kicking gravel into the void. Now the road was dirt, barely wide enough for one vehicle. Trees loomed on both sides, bark carved with symbols that writhed when he looked directly at them. The woman leaned closer. He saw her reflection in the windshield, her face melting in and out of different shapes. A child, an old woman, a version of his mother. Paul didn't flinch. "You're not real," he said. The voice that answered came from the radio again. This time, it wasn't hers. It was Manny's. "She's not real, but the deal is." "What deal?" "She drives. You survive." Just one night. Paul stared at the road. It was fading, turning to fog. The trees peeled away like paper, revealing a drop off on either side. No ground. No guardrails. Just void. "Let me out," he whispered. The truck slowed. Ahead, the road ended, and standing at the edge, himself. Paul Fay too. Same clothes, same face, but hollow, eyes black. He was holding a set of keys in one hand, and a bone in the other. The truck stopped on its own. The woman stepped out. Paul didn't. He couldn't move. She walked to his double and pressed her forehead to his. Then turned back to the truck, waited. Paul stepped out slowly, against his own will. His reflection didn't move. The woman pointed to him. "You're the last one. The loop ends here." Paul took a step forward. The ground beneath the cliff cracked. The void yawned wider. Behind him, he heard the truck door slam shut. Tires squealed. The truck reversed on its own and sped toward him. Paul had just enough time to jump. He hit the dirt, rolled, and looked up. The truck drove itself off the edge. No driver, just screaming, and as it fell, the loop snapped. He woke up in a hospital bed, bright lights, beeping machines. A nurse leaned over him, smiling. "You were lucky," she said. "A trucker found you unconscious at mile marker 43. Your heart stopped. They had to restart it twice." Paul looked at his hands. No bruises, no cuts, like nothing had happened. "Is the truck okay?" The nurse tilted her head. "What truck?" He blinked. "I was in a truck." She frowned. "You were found lying in the middle of the road. No vehicle, no ID, nothing. Just you." Paul sat up, looked out the window. The street outside was still, normal, except across the parking lot, in the very last row, sat his truck. Parked perfectly, windows fogged from the inside. Passenger side door, wide open. Paul didn't check out of the hospital. He walked out. Shoes barely tied, hospital gown flapping in the cold wind. Heart monitor leads still stuck to his chest. Nobody tried to stop him. Nobody even looked his way. He crossed the parking lot, eyes locked on the truck. Same rusted hood, same bent antenna. Passenger side door still wide open. He expected to feel fear. But what he felt instead was familiarity, like a song you hate but can't stop humming. He climbed into the driver's seat. The moment his weight hit the cushion, the door slammed shut. The locks clicked down. The key turned itself in the ignition. The radio crackled to life. "Welcome back, Paul." He didn't flinch. He just drove. The hospital vanished in the rear view. He wasn't sure how. He didn't take a turn, didn't pass a sign. But in less than 5 minutes, the world had changed. The streetlights flickered, then went black. The sky peeled open again, stars swallowed whole. The road stretched into nothing, and every tree they passed had something hanging from its branches. Some of them were people, some of them weren't. Then he saw it, up ahead. A new sign, a new number, Mel 44. He slammed the brakes. Tires screamed, but the truck didn't stop. The speedometer didn't read numbers anymore. It just ticked upward, into symbols he didn't understand. Time warped. His hands looked older. His breath came out in foggy gasps. Something was changing. Someone was getting in. He looked over, and saw the passenger seat was no longer empty. Not the woman this time. Someone else, wearing his face. Not the melted, void-eyed reflection from before. This one was perfect. Down to the little scar on Paul's chin from when he was 10. Twin Paul smiled. "Don't you get it?" the copy said. "You never left the loop. You just moved deeper." The truck hit something. Not a person, not an animal. A moment. Everything froze, outside still, inside humming. Paul looked in the rear view. There were 10 versions of the same truck following them now. All identical. All with someone in the passenger seat. Some of them had people screaming. Some had people grinning. One had someone banging their head against the glass until it cracked. Twin Paul pointed out the windshield. "See that? Up ahead, a tunnel. One that hadn't been there before. Made of bones, roots, machinery. It pulsed like a living throat. You've got 2 choices," the copy said. "Go in and finish it, or turn around and start all over. Wake up back at the hospital. Go home. Pretend it didn't happen." Paul stared at the tunnel. Will it end? The twin tilted its head. If it does, you won't be you anymore. Paul gripped the wheel. The tunnel got closer, closer then, a scream. From the radio, raw, animal, and buried underneath it, a voice whispering, "Don't let it drive. It feeds when it drives." Paul turned to the passenger seat. Empty again, just the keys on the seat now. And a single line of text burned into the windshield, "Only the passenger walks away." The truck reached the tunnel mouth. The lights flickered. Everything stopped. Paul reached across and opened the passenger door. Waited. The truck idled. Then he whispered, "I'll drive." And for the first time in nights, the world listened. Paul drove into the tunnel. It swallowed the truck whole. No turning back. The walls pressed in. Gnarled roots, tangled wires, ribs of things that were never human. The headlights only lit up a few feet ahead before being swallowed by darkness. And then, the sound died. No engine hum. No tires on gravel. No breathing. Nothing. It was like driving underwater in a dream. Every second stretched. His heartbeat gone. He tried to speak. His lips moved. No voice. Even the thought of sound was fading. Then the whispers returned. Not in his ears. In his bones. "You're getting closer." Not to the end. To the beginning. He felt the steering wheel fight back. Not a swerve. Not a jolt. More like a tug. Like the truck wanted to take control. Paul tightened his grip. No. The whispers laughed. Not malicious. Not mocking. Hungry. A shape appeared in the headlights. Human-sized. Standing in the center of the tunnel. Head tilted. One arm longer than the other. Paul hit the brakes. The truck didn't stop. The shape raised a hand and pointed directly at him. Then the windshield shattered inward, but not from an impact. From a scream. A soundless, invisible blast that shook the truck and cracked reality at the seams. Paul blacked out, but not fully. He saw flashes. A gas station at night. Rain. The red glow of a sign that read, "Mile 37." Even though he knew he'd passed that long ago. A girl standing at the edge of the road, head down, mouth moving, but her voice replaced by static. The sky turning inside out. His mother sitting beside him, weeping blood onto the dash. Then, a face. Right in front of him, pressed against the glass. His eyes sewn shut, mouth stitched wide open, skin covered in tally marks. It whispered one word into the glass, "R-U-N." He snapped back. Tunnel gone. Road ahead. The truck was parked on the shoulder, engine idling. A new sign stood before him. Mile 45. He turned to the passenger seat. Not empty. A child sat there now, no more than 10 years old, wearing a red hoodie, bare feet, holding a crumpled photo. Paul's photo, from when he was a boy. The child looked up at him and said, "You brought it here." Paul opened the door. The wind howled. The sky overhead swirled like it was trying to choose a new color. "What did I bring?" he asked. The child stood on the seat, leaned in, and whispered into his ear, "The driver never arrives," then stepped out of the truck and walked into the dark. Paul was alone again. Mile 45 behind him, no map, no voice, just the road. And somewhere far ahead, something waiting with its headlights off. The next few miles didn't exist. Paul didn't remember driving them. Didn't remember turning the wheel. Didn't remember blinking. 1 minute, he was staring at mile 45. The next, mile 53. There was a weight in his chest now, heavy like lead, tight like a scream held in too long. The longer he sat behind the wheel, the more the air in the cab thickened, like the truck was filling with invisible water. The passenger seat was empty again, but the imprint of a child's body remained in the leather, pressed deep, too deep. Mile 54. The radio turned on by itself, but there was no music. Only the same phrase, looped in a soft, slow whisper. He said he wouldn't come. He said he wouldn't come. He said he wouldn't come. Over and over. Paul reached to turn the knob, but his hand passed through it. No resistance. No feeling. Like the radio wasn't part of the truck anymore. Like he wasn't. Mile 55. The road narrowed. Trees on either side leaned in. Branches hung like fingers, swaying just enough to look like they were reaching. Then he saw it. A gas station. Not like the others. This one was familiar. Or it used to be. It had the same cracked neon sign, now dark. Same ice chest outside, covered in vines. Same payphone that hadn't worked in decades. Because this was the gas station his father used to take him to, when he was 7. When the road still had rules. When the world still made sense. He parked and stepped out. The second his boots touched the pavement, the station lights flickered on. Every bulb, every sign. Even the soda machine in the corner hissed to life, displaying the same root beer his dad used to buy him. Paul walked slowly, hand resting on the warm hood of the truck. The air smelled like motor oil, rotting wood, and something sweet. Sickly sweet, like burnt candy. He opened the gas station door. A bell rang, but no one was inside. The shelves were full, perfectly stocked. Every item was from his childhood, old brands that didn't exist anymore. Candy with faded wrappers, newspapers with headlines from 1993. The back freezer hummed. Inside, he saw dozens of VHS tapes stacked side by side, each one labeled in Sharpie. AMUL1, AMUL2, AMUL3, ELE66. He reached for one. MIL27. The moment he touched it, the lights cut out. The only glow came from the screen on the counter. A small TV, dusty, ancient. It turned on. Paul didn't touch it. The tape was already playing. On the screen, a home video. His childhood birthday party. Age 8, balloons. Cake. His mother singing. But the video didn't follow him. It followed the clown they'd hired. He'd forgotten all about that clown. Except, in the video, the clown kept looking at the camera. Never at the kids. Never smiling. Just staring. And when the birthday song ended, the video glitched. The clown was now standing behind the camera, leaning in, breathing, whispering something Paul couldn't make out. Then the screen went black, and on it, in dripping red text, 4 words appeared: YOUNEVR lefty, PUL. The freezer door behind him creaked open. Paul turned and saw himself. Same clothes, same eyes. But the figure's mouth was stitched shut with black wire, and from its neck down it was melting, oozing like asphalt on a summer road. The black tar of forgotten memories dripping onto the white tiles. It raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the shelves. Specifically, the snack aisle. Paul followed the gesture, found a bag of chips, expired in 1993, and underneath it, hidden behind the shelf's baseboard, a severed finger, wrapped in a strip of familiar denim, his own jeans. He ran. Out the station, back into the truck, slamming the door shut as someone screamed behind him. The gas station lights exploded, one by one, and then everything was silent, except for the tape, still playing in the truck's passenger side mirror. His birthday, rewinding, replaying, again and again. Mile 56. The truck moved on its own now. The wheel was ice cold, and every bump in the road made Paul feel like his skin was peeling from the inside out. The road wasn't a road anymore. It was a mouth. Blacktop teeth grinding beneath the tires, a tongue of broken concrete, breath made of smoke and ash, and somewhere up ahead a sound, not mechanical, not human, something breathing, heavy, wet, waiting. The sign ahead was half burned, but Paul could still make out the number mile 60. Underneath it, someone had carved into the metal, "Don't forget what you are." He didn't know what it meant, but deep in his gut, something did. Something ancient, buried, and waking up. The truck stopped, not because Paul hit the brakes, it just knew. The wheels skidded to a halt on their own, just past the warped, half-burned sign that read Mile E60. Ahead, the road vanished into a tunnel of fog. Dense, alive, swirling like it had lungs. The headlights cut through only a few feet of it before being swallowed whole. Paul leaned forward, squinting. He could just barely make out the faint outline of a building, a house, old, 2 stories, slutched like a dying animal. It shouldn't have been there. It wasn't there yesterday. But now, it waited. Right off the side of the road, like it had always belonged there, like it had been watching the whole time. Paul stepped out of the truck. Immediately, the world went silent. No wind, no bugs, no engine hum. Even the gravel beneath his boots didn't crunch. It was as if the moment he crossed that invisible boundary into mile 60. Sound itself had been swallowed. He approached the house slowly. Every window was dark. Every inch of it leaned away from him, like it was trying to escape his gaze. The porch creaked without being touched. The door was already open, cracked an inch, like it had been waiting specifically for him. He pushed it open and walked inside. The air was freezing. Not cold, dead. The kind of temperature you feel inside hospital morgues or inside meat freezers long after the power's been shut off. The wallpaper was peeling in strips. The floor sagged like wet cardboard. There were no family photos, no furniture, nothing that suggested anyone had ever lived here. And yet, there were toys scattered across the floor. Tiny plastic figurines, all of them arranged in lines, leading deeper into the house. Each one had its arms broken off. Each one had its eyes scratched out. Paul knelt and picked one up, a familiar shape. He turned it over. The bottom had something scrawled in black marker, ISAWO for RST. A creak echoed from upstairs, footsteps, heavy, slow, dragging. Paul moved toward the staircase, but something made him stop. A sound behind him. The front door had closed, and now someone was whispering his name from the kitchen. Not just whispering, pleading. Paul, Paul, help me. He froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. He stepped toward the kitchen. The room was drenched in darkness. But in the center, illuminated by an unseen light, stood a dinner table. And at that table sat his mother. Or something that looked like her. Hair the same. Face almost right, but the eyes were too wide, too unblinking. And when she smiled, her teeth were black. Not stained, not dirty. Just black, like they'd been dipped in the asphalt from outside. Sit down, Paul, she said gently. It's your birthday. He didn't move. Couldn't, because behind her something shifted. Not a person. A shape, tall, bent, wrapped in curtains of meat and threadbare skin. Its head dragged the ceiling. Its arms reached the floor. And in one of its long, trembling fingers, it held a cake, made of teeth. Paul ran. Up the stairs, 2 at a time. The house shook, screamed. Behind every door he passed, he heard himself, laughing, crying, begging. Each room contained a different memory. One held his childhood bedroom, still covered in glow, in the dark stars, where he once woke screaming every night for 2 months straight. Another was the bathroom from the night he'd watched his father's knuckles break his mother's jaw. The third was just darkness, and a single chair, facing the wall, with someone sitting in it. Paul didn't stop to look. He made it to the attic door. It opened before he touched it. The attic was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, all cracked, some full length, some handheld, some shattered into glittering, jagged shards, and in each one he saw a different version of himself. Some younger, some older, some smiling, some bleeding, some dead. One of them stared back with pitch, black eyes and whispered, "This is where the road ends." Paul stepped forward, hands shaking. "No," he whispered. "I'm not done." But the reflections didn't blink, didn't move, until one did. The version of himself with black eyes tilted his head, slowly, deliberately, and then stepped out of the mirror. No cracking glass, no sound, just movement, effortless, unnatural. They stood face to face, 2 Pauls, one real, one made of memory and tar. "You already died here," the doppelganger whispered. "You've just been driving around it ever since." Paul raised a trembling fist, but before he could strike, the attic fell away, not collapsed, not broken, just gone, as if it had never been there. And now, he was back in the truck, engine running, seat warm, radio off. Just past the sign that said MIL 61. His hands were covered in blood, but he felt no wounds. There was something sitting in the passenger seat, a bundle wrapped in burlap and stained with something dark. It pulsed, softly, like it had a heartbeat. He didn't touch it. He didn't look at it. He just drove. Because whatever it was, it came with him now. The bundle hadn't moved in over an hour. But Paul could still feel it pulsing, like it was synced with his heartbeat. He tried not to look at it. Tried to ignore the slick stains it left on the seat. He turned up the radio to drown out the whispers. But the radio only spat static, and through the static something kept laughing. Not loud, not manic, just slow, drawn out, like it already knew how this ended. He was passing mile 64 when the lights appeared. Red and blue. Swirling, flashing a cop car behind him. Paul's blood turned to ice. He checked his speed, 45 and a 55. No traffic violations, no swerving. But the lights persisted. And then the siren chirped once, a warning. Paul slowed and pulled off onto the shoulder. The cop car stopped behind him. Its headlights flooded the cab. The bundle pulsed harder now. It was excited. Paul rolled down his window. Fog crept in immediately, curling around his face like fingers. The cruiser's door opened. Boots stepped out, heavy, crisp. A silhouette moved through the beams, tall, broad-shouldered, hat low. The officer approached slowly. No urgency, no flashlight. And then he spoke. Evan and son. Paul looked up, and every hair on his body stood on end, because the cop was smiling. Not a polite smile. Not one of those officer of the law, grins meant to calm you down. This was wide. Too wide. Unbroken, as if his mouth had been carved open. His skin was too smooth. His eyes were glassy. Empty, like they had been painted on. Paul couldn't move. The cop leaned down slightly, tilting his head. Everything all right tonight? Paul swallowed. Yes, sir. Just passing through. That smile didn't waver. Passing through, the cop repeated slowly. This stretch of road don't go nowhere anymore. Hasn't for years. Paul blinked. What do you mean? The cop's voice dropped an octave. I mean, there ain't no more road left. Paul turned to look at the highway, and where there had once been two solid yellow lines stretching on into the night, there was now only black, not pavement. Not asphalt. Just nothing. A chasm. Like the road had been peeled away by something enormous and patient. He turned back to the officer, but the man was gone. Vanished. No footsteps. No sound. Only the faint smell of cigarette smoke and rotting flowers. Paul turned forward, and the cop was sitting in the passenger seat, smiling, right next to the bundle. Let me give you a warning, the cop said calmly. His voice was too close. Too wet. He didn't blink, didn't breathe. His badge didn't have a name. Just a symbol, a spiraling black sun etched deep into rusted metal. Paul's hand twitched toward the door. The cop didn't move. Just one thing, he whispered. You ever see mile 66? Paul shook his head. You'll know when you do, the cop said. Then he opened the door and stepped out. Just vanished into the fog. Didn't shut the door behind him. Didn't look back. And now the bundle had changed. It was unwrapped. Inside was a face. Not attached to a head. Just a face. Stretched tight over burlap. But it was his. Paul's own face. Eyes closed. Mouth sewn shut. Still warm. Still bleeding. He screamed and threw it out the window, but the moment it hit the ground, the truck jerked, like it had hit something. He slammed the brakes, turned to look in the rearview mirror, and saw himself lying in the road, motionless. Same clothes, same face, same tattoo on the forearm. But as he stared, the body began to smile. Paul floored it. Tires screeched. The truck tore down the ruined highway like it was being chased by the devil himself. Mile 65 came and went in a blur of static and shadow. Signs no longer had words, just symbols, things that made his brain itch. Every line on the road bent toward him, like the asphalt wanted him to stay, like the highway was getting closer. Not longer, not more distant, but closer, as if it were wrapping around him like a snake. Then came the tunnel. No signs, no warning, just a sudden black opening in the side of a hill. He should have braked. He didn't. The headlights barely pierced the void, but he kept going, every muscle tight. Inside, the walls were wet. Not concrete, not brick, something that pulsed, something that pulsed. He drove for minutes, maybe hours. The clock on the dash spun like it was possessed. The air turned thick and syrupy. And then, without warning, he emerged into daylight. Not dawn, not sunset, just bright, sterile daylight. Everything was silent. The road was gone. He was parked in the middle of a field of mirrors. Hundreds of them, all around the truck. Some tall, some small, each reflecting something wrong. The sky in the mirrors was bleeding. The grass was ash. And Paul was smiling, every reflection, wide, dead-eyed, like the cop, like the thing in the attic, like the face in the burlap. Then, all at once, every mirror cracked. Not shattered, cracked, right down the middle. And from somewhere beneath the truck, he heard, Mile 66 is waiting. There was no map for where Paul had gone. No direction, no GPS, no road. Only the mirrors, hundreds of them, stretching to the horizon in every direction. He got out of the truck. The mirrors didn't reflect him anymore. Now they reflected someone else. A man in his 40s, dressed like Paul, standing like Paul, but older, worn, scarred. Paul stared at the nearest mirror. The version of him inside smiled. Then it reached through the glass. Not shattered, not cracked, just passed through it like water. The hand was real, veined, strong, nails like cracked leather. Paul stumbled back. The reflection stepped halfway out, boots crunching on dead grass. "You're catching up," the reflection said. Its voice was low, not sinister, almost tired. Paul tried to speak but couldn't. His throat felt stitched shut. The reflection raised a finger to its lips. Shoo. Then it turned and walked backward, into the mirror. Gone. The field went silent again, but the truck was gone now. No engine, no keys, no escape. Only a sign where the truck had been, ILE 66 painted in black, smeared strokes. Like it had been scrawled in ash or dried blood. Paul didn't remember walking. But somehow his feet were moving, taking him deeper into the field, through the mirrors, around them, under a sky that felt too close. Then came the whisper. A dozen voices at once, like a choir underwater. "Do you remember what you left behind?" He turned, and the mirrors shifted. Now they showed his past. Not memories, moments. He saw himself arguing with a woman in a kitchen, slamming the door, peeling out of the driveway. He saw a child watching from the window, tears on her face. Paul blinked, the mirror fogged, and then it was just his reflection again, smiling. The wind picked up, dry and metallic, carried a sound with it, a horn, long and low, like a folk horn from somewhere far below the surface of the earth. Paul followed it, because there was nowhere else to go. Ahead, the mirrors grew larger, some as tall as buildings, but they weren't upright anymore. They'd started to lean. Some of them hung in the air. Some grew out of the ground like tombstones. And in one of them, he saw the cop again, sitting behind a desk this time, filing paperwork, smiling. "Can I help you?" The cop asked without looking up. Paul said nothing, but the mirror began to crack, slowly, until it spiderwebbed completely. And on the other side, Paul saw a waiting room. He stepped through. No resistance. The world changed again. Now he was standing in a pale, fluorescent lit office. Empty chairs, blank posters on the walls, a receptionist's desk with no one behind it. Just a bell. He rang it. Ding. A door opened. From inside, footsteps. The cop emerged again. Same smile. Only now his uniform was soaked, dripping, staining the tiles, as if he'd just crawled out of a flooded basement. "Welcome to Mile 66, he said. "Time to fill out your form." Paul tried to speak. The cop handed him a clipboard, but the paper was empty. Just a single line at the top. "Describe what you are." Paul stared at it. His hands trembled. "What is this?" The cop grinned wider. "That's the price." "For what? To go back?" Paul looked around. "Back where?" The cop chuckled. "Exactly." Behind him, another door creaked open. Inside was the road, or something like it. But it was wrong. The sky above it spun in slow spirals. The trees had hands instead of leaves. The pavement was covered in teeth. "Write it down," the cop said again, "or stay here. Forever." Paul looked back at the form. The pen in his hand felt alive. It beat with a pulse that wasn't his. He wrote slowly. Each letter felt carved into his skin. "I am what's left." The room shuddered, the mirrors cracked, every single one at once. The clipboard dissolved in his hands, and the cop tipped his hat. "See you soon," he whispered. Then he stepped backward and was gone. Paul walked through the next door, onto the road. Only it wasn't mile 66 anymore. It was mile 0. The beginning, not of a highway, but of something older, something that never ended. And somewhere deep in his chest, Paul felt something else wake up. The sky above wasn't blue anymore. It was black, ink, streaked with cracks, each one bleeding with the strange color of a setting sun, though no sun had been there for hours. A horizon that stretched endlessly, merging with something unseen in the distance. Mile 0. The road was alive. Not in the way of a forest, where trees twist and grow, but like something waiting. Something that listens. Paul's feet tapped the asphalt, but the sound was wrong. Each step was swallowed, like he was walking through wet sand, or thickened air. But there was no sand, no moisture, just the air dense and thick with the smell of something he couldn't name. The road itself felt aware. Beneath his boots, the asphalt pulsed. He could almost hear it. The heartbeat. Every step took him further, but no closer. It was like the road had no end, and yet he was always moving toward something. A sound. Whispers. Low voices that murmured like they were carried on the wind. But the wind didn't exist here. And the whispers, they weren't behind him or ahead. They were inside him. "What's left of you?" the voice asked. He stopped. It was too loud now. Too close. He clutched his chest. His heart was racing too fast. Too loud. They were listening. Paul turned and saw the mirror. The one that wasn't there before. It stood alone in the middle of the road. It wasn't one of the tall, angled ones he'd seen in the field. This one was small, framed in black, the kind you'd see in a family's home gathering dust. And it was shattered. The glass was cracked, but something else, something familiar, lay inside. It was a photo of Paul, young, happy. His smile was genuine. There was light in his eyes. He remembered the day, his wife, his daughter. They had been at the park. He felt a sharp pang in his chest. Was this what it had been all along? Had it always been this way? The reflection in the shattered mirror shifted. The photo blurred, changed. It was a different photo now, a darker one. Paul gasped. In the image, he saw his own hands, fingers curled into claws. His face twisted into something monstrous, eyes wide with terror. "You were always this," the whisper came again, closer now. "The highway made you, and you'll never leave." The photo began to burn, slowly at first. Then, like it was being dragged through a fire, the edges blackened, curling away into nothing. Paul backed away from the mirror. But it didn't let him. He turned again. But now the highway stretched backward, a continuous loop of black asphalt curling toward an impossible horizon. Behind him, the mirrors had multiplied. Lines of them now, each one taller. Each one reflecting something different. The voice started again. This time it was louder, clear, as if spoken from within his own skull. "Do you see it now? What you left behind?" And there, on the mirror at the far end, he saw her, his daughter, standing still, alone in the glass, her small form outlined in shadow, her eyes wide, staring right at him. Her lips trembled, but she made no sound. "She's waiting for you," the voice whispered. Paul's heart froze. The road stretched on, endless. He couldn't see her anymore, but he could feel her. He could feel her stare, her waiting, and he could feel something else now. A pressure on his chest, a weight he couldn't shake. The whispers returned, now accompanied by the sound of footsteps. Heavy, methodical. Right behind him, he spun. Nothing but the endless highway. But then, a flicker. A movement. In the mirrors. A shape. Tall, looming. A figure shrouded in black. It stepped out of the glass. No sound, no warning. Just it was. Paul's breath caught. His body froze. For the first time, he couldn't look away. The figure stepped forward. It had no face. Nothing recognizable. Only an endless shifting void of blackness that seemed to twist with the motion of the air itself. As if it were made of the very road beneath him, the dark and heavy weight of it. Alive. It didn't walk like a person. It glided. Each movement sucked the life out of the air, making it harder to breathe. It was in front of him now. Towering. Silent. "You've been walking for so long," it whispered. Its voice was like the sound of 1,000 dead leaves in the wind, scratching, scraping. Paul couldn't move. The figure tilted its head slightly, and the air froze. He could feel the presence. Not just behind him, but inside him. The weight of the figure didn't press against him physically, but it sat in his bones. "This road never ends," it said. Its voice was impossibly deep, ancient. "This road is the path you chose. You cannot leave. You will not leave." Paul's mind raced. How long had he been on this highway? He didn't know. He couldn't remember. "You never left," the voice hissed. "You're still here, Paul, and you'll be here forever." A roar erupted, the ground shaking beneath his feet. The figure was gone, just as quickly as it had appeared. But Paul didn't breathe a sigh of relief. The whispers had grown louder. They were inside his head, the mirrors. They were all staring at him now. And then, through the fractured glass of the nearest mirror, a new image emerged. A hand, small, delicate, fingers outstretched. It was her, his daughter. But this time, her fingers weren't reaching out to him. They were gripping something, a shadow. It was stretching toward him, dark and malevolent. A figure Paul couldn't make out, but he could feel its presence, and it was coming for him. The hand in the mirror stretched toward him. Small, trembling fingers, barely more than a wisp of a shadow, reached out from the fractured glass. Paul's heart skipped a beat. It was her, his daughter. Her fingers curled, desperate, as if she were reaching for him. But there was something wrong with the image. Her fingers weren't reaching toward him to be saved. They were grasping for something else. Something darker. The shadow that loomed behind her. A figure that seemed to writhe and twist in ways that no human could. Was slowly stretching its tendrils toward Paul, its elongated fingers flickering like a dying flame. It moved with purpose. Hunger. He couldn't move. His feet were locked in place. His eyes were glued to the reflection in the shattered glass. The whispers had stopped. In their place, a heavy silence hung in the air. And then, as if the world had been holding its breath, the shadow spoke. "She belongs to me now." The words slithered into his mind, crawling through his thoughts like a cold, venomous snake. His stomach churned. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to understand what it meant. The figure in the mirror grew more distinct, more tangible with every second. It was tall, its form a silhouette of twisted limbs, sharp angles, and shifting shadows. A face, if it could be called that, hovered just above the small outstretched hand. Its eyes were two hollow voids, empty but full of promise. Its mouth, no, its teeth, were too sharp, too jagged, as if they belonged to something that was never meant to be seen by human eyes. The figure smiled. Paul felt his chest tighten. "You were foolish to come here," it hissed, the words echoing around him. "Now, your daughter is mine, and you will never escape." He could feel it. The pull, a magnetic force that tugged at his very being, luring him in, urging him closer to the mirror. But something deep inside him snapped. He couldn't let it happen. Not his daughter. Not again. His muscles screamed in protest as he forced his legs to move. The weight of the highway beneath him felt like it had doubled in mass, but he didn't stop. The mirrors, they weren't real. They couldn't be. They were just illusions. tricks. He had to keep moving. The whispers started up again, but this time they were different. They were screaming. The sound was deafening, echoing in his skull. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and the more he ran, the more distorted the world around him became. It was as if reality itself were warping. The sky above was no longer the sickly dark hue it had been. Now it was shifting, folding in on itself like a torn piece of paper, edges fraying as it collapsed in on him. And then he saw it. Up ahead, barely visible through the haze, a figure stood at the edge of the road. It wasn't the shadow from the mirror. It was someone else. Someone Paul didn't recognize. The figure's silhouette was tall, long-limbed, almost too tall. Its face was a blur, like it had been smeared across the air itself, and yet its eyes were impossible to ignore. They glowed, a pale, sickly yellow. Paul stopped, his feet skidding to a halt. There was something about this figure that pulled at him like a dark magnet. He tried to turn away, but his body refused to listen. The figure stepped forward, and with it, the air grew colder. The wind, though non-existent just moments ago, began to whip at him, stinging his skin with an unnatural chill. "You're running away from something that's already inside you," the figure said, its voice raspy and cold, like the sound of ice cracking. Paul couldn't respond. He couldn't find his voice. The whispers from the mirrors, his daughter's voice, the screeching wind, the figure in front of him. It was all too much. His mind was cracking. "You'll never escape. You belong to it." The figure stretched its arms wide, and in an instant, the space around Paul collapsed. The road no longer stretched ahead. There was no horizon, no sky, no asphalt beneath his feet. It was all just darkness. And in that darkness, he felt it. The weight. It was like being suffocated. His chest felt like it was being crushed under the pressure of the air, and for a split second, he couldn't breathe. And then, he saw it. A pair of eyes. Cold. Empty. The eyes of the figure. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the figure vanished. The pressure disappeared, but it left him gasping for air, his heart pounding in his chest. The darkness had receded, but the road was still there. Twisting. Paul stumbled backward, his legs shaking beneath him. But something was wrong. The road was changing again. It was no longer just a stretch of empty asphalt. The edges were curled, like the road was folding into itself. And there, at the very end of it, just at the edge of the curve, he saw another mirror. This one wasn't cracked. It was intact. He had to look. He didn't want to. But something inside him, some primal instinct, forced his gaze toward it. In the reflection, he saw her. His daughter, and this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a figure. A shadow, like the one from the mirror before. But it was no longer a shadow. It had a face. It was his face. He could feel the weight of it, the truth. The realization crashed over him with a brutal force, shattering his thoughts. He had been here before. The mirror, it was always him. The mirror flickered, and for a moment, Paul wasn't sure whether his reflection was his own or someone else's. No, it couldn't be. He couldn't be seeing what he thought he was seeing. The figure beside his daughter, his reflection, was not him. It couldn't be him. But the closer he stared, the more certain he became. It was him. The twisted version of himself in the mirror wore a grin, a wide, manic grin that sent a shiver through his spine. The reflection's eyes were hollow, blackened, as if drained of all light. It didn't look like someone he once knew. It looked like something that had been born from the darkness itself. His daughter, his poor, innocent daughter, stood between the two versions of himself, her small hands reaching out to the reflection, her fingers trembling as they tried to grasp the shadow. The dark reflection of Paul spoke, its voice harsh and unnatural. She was always mine. She was never meant to escape. His chest tightened as the words pierced his mind. He couldn't move, couldn't look away from the mirror. His body felt heavy, like the weight of the world had settled onto his shoulders, pushing him down, anchoring him to the spot. Behind the twisted reflection of himself, something shifted. The air seemed to bend, to stretch and fold, as if the world around him was warping. A sound began to echo, soft at first, but quickly growing louder. It was the sound of footsteps, heavy footsteps. Then the ground began to tremble. Something was coming. The dark figure in the mirror stretched out its arms, and for a fleeting moment, Paul thought he saw its fingers stretch toward him, toward the real world, toward him. And then, suddenly, the ground beneath his feet cracked. Paul stumbled backward, falling to the hard, cracked asphalt. He could barely catch his breath as the tremors shook the very earth beneath him. His fingers scraped across the rough road, desperately reaching for something to hold onto. The footsteps grew louder. Something was coming. He scrambled to his feet, every part of his body screaming for him to run. But his legs felt like lead. He couldn't get away fast enough. And then, there it was. A figure emerged from the shadows at the edge of the road. At first, Paul couldn't make it out. It was just a silhouette, but the more his eyes adjusted to the growing darkness, the more he saw it clearly. A tall, spindly figure. It was dressed in rags, torn and tattered like the remnants of a life long forgotten. Its face was obscured by a hood, but the hollow, black eyes that gleamed from beneath it were impossible to ignore. It stepped forward, its movements jerky, disjointed, like a puppet on strings. And then Paul saw it. The figure's face, twisted and broken, was no longer covered by the hood. It was his face, the hollow eyes, the cracked skin, the unnerving wide grin that stretched across its face. It was him, but twisted and wrong. The reflection in the mirror was not just a reflection. It was not just some trick of the light or a hallucination. It was something far worse. Something he couldn't fully comprehend. You thought you could escape? The figure rasped, its voice deep and hollow, like the sound of rusted metal scraping against stone. But you can't. You're already here. Paul's heart raced, a cold sweat slicking his skin as he backed away, his mind reeling with the implications. What was happening? What was this thing? And how had it come from the reflection? It took a slow step forward, its spindly fingers reaching out, each finger long and thin, like brittle twigs. The air around it seemed to warp, the temperature plummeting with every movement. Paul turned and ran. He didn't look back. He couldn't. But the footsteps behind him grew closer, too close. He dared a glance over his shoulder, just in time to see the shadow reach out, its long fingers brushing against his shoulder. The touch was ice cold, colder than anything he'd ever felt, and it sent an icy shock through his spine. His legs buckled beneath him, and he fell hard to the ground, the gravel biting into his palms. He didn't dare look up. He could hear the thing getting closer. Its breath ragged and heavy, like the sound of someone struggling to draw air from a collapsed lung. And then, silence. Complete and utter silence. The footsteps had stopped. Paul slowly rose to his knees, his heart pounding in his chest. Sweat dripped down his brow, his body shaking from the cold and fear. He couldn't stay on the ground. He had to keep moving. He had to. Dad. The voice was soft at first, almost a whisper carried on the wind. But the moment it reached his ears, Paul froze. He knew that voice. It was his daughter's voice. Lily? He looked around frantically. There was no sign of her, but that voice, it had to be her. Dade, please. The voice whispered again, more desperate this time. He followed the sound of her voice, his legs barely carrying him as he stumbled toward the edge of the road. The darkness seemed to press in on him from all sides, swallowing him whole. Lily, he called out, his voice shaking with panic. Nothing. The road stretched on before him, endless, desolate, and twisted. And then he saw her. There, standing at the edge of the highway, her small figure barely visible against the backdrop of the pitch black sky, was Lily, his daughter. Lily! He shouted, his heart lifting with hope. But as he took a step forward, a horrible realization gripped him. Lily wasn't moving. Her body was still, her face expressionless, her eyes empty and dark. It was as if she were just a reflection of what he remembered, an echo of her that had been twisted by the darkness. No, no, no. It wasn't her. It was the reflection again. The figure behind her stirred. It was standing now, watching him, waiting, and then it grinned, its teeth sharp and grotesque in the moonlight. She belongs to me. The world around him started to unravel again. The ground cracked open beneath his feet, and the figure's hands reached for him, pulling him into the darkness, pulling him into the void. The darkness swallowed Paul whole. It wasn't the same kind of dark he had known. It wasn't the comforting quiet of the night or the blackness of an empty room. This was something else entirely. It was a cold, suffocating void that clung to him like a living thing, wrapping itself around his mind and body, pulling him deeper and deeper. He couldn't breathe. It felt like his lungs had been filled with something thick and heavy, suffocating him from the inside out. His chest constricted as if invisible hands were tightening around his ribs, pushing the air from his body, leaving only a slow, desperate gasp in his throat. The world spun, fragmented, disjointed. The road, the night, the reflection of his daughter. All of it twisted and warped into something unrecognizable. And then, in the midst of it all, there was a voice. It was low, guttural, and faintly familiar, echoing like a whisper from the farthest corner of his mind. You thought you could escape. Paul's head snapped up. His eyes darted around, but there was nothing. No figure, no source of the voice. Just the blackness pressing in from all sides. I am the road. I am the void. The air around him grew colder, and Paul shivered involuntarily. The voice was closer now, swirling around him like a storm, a dark presence that seemed to materialize from nothing. He tried to move, but his limbs felt frozen, as though they were cemented to the ground. His heart pounded in his chest, the beats coming faster and faster, like the rhythm of a drum. And then, through the suffocating darkness, he saw it. A flicker, a shadow. No, not just a shadow, a figure, standing in the middle of the void. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its body stretched and twisted, like a tree that had grown far beyond the limits of nature. Its skin was as dark as the night itself, and its eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, glowed faintly with a light that seemed to draw him in. And then, the grin, a wide, toothy grin that stretched impossibly far across its face. It like it was carved from the very fabric of the dark. It wasn't just an expression, it was an invitation to something worse. To something coming for him. Paul's breath quickened, his heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the figure. He knew this thing. It wasn't the same as the twisted reflection. It wasn't just another manifestation of darkness. This was the thing that had been pulling him into the highway's grip. And now, it was coming for him. You belong to me now. The voice rasped, the words slithering through the dark like venom. I am the one who pulls you down. I am the one who will never let you go. The shadow lunged forward. It moved faster than Paul could comprehend, its body rippling like smoke. Like something that wasn't meant to exist in the physical world. Its long, spindly arms reached for him, grabbing his shoulders with an impossible strength. Paul screamed. The world around him broke apart. The void shattered into 1,000 pieces, each fragment swirling and warping into shapes he couldn't understand. His body jerked forward. His mind spun out of control, and everything went black. But then, a jolt. Suddenly, the pressure released. The hands around his shoulders disappeared. The dark presence, the thing, was gone. Silence. For a long moment, Paul's body hung in a frozen state, as if suspended in time. His heart was still racing, the pounding in his chest deafening in the stillness. And then, the ground beneath him shifted again. He staggered, unsteady, as the tremors returned. The shadows loomed over him, stretching long and far, like the claws of some unseen beast. Paul blinked, his vision adjusting. There, at the far end of the road, was a figure. A real figure. A living one. It was Lily. He recognized her instantly, her small frame standing still under the dim, flickering light. She was alive. She was real. But something was wrong. Her face was pale, almost translucent, her eyes wide and unblinking. She didn't move. She didn't speak. It was as though she were waiting. Waiting for him. "Lily!" Paul shouted, his voice hoarse. "Lily!"
Please!
But she didn't respond. Instead, the darkness around her seemed to grow, to pulse, as if it were alive, feeding on her stillness, growing with her silence. The wind howled. The road stretched on, but there was no end in sight. Paul took a step forward, but the ground beneath his feet cracked again, the asphalt splitting wide open, a deep, black abyss forming where the road had once been. He couldn't stop himself. The pull was too strong. He couldn't let her go. But as he took another step, he saw it. The reflection. It wasn't in the mirror this time. It was in the air, floating in front of him like a twisted, ghostly apparition. It was him. The same distorted grin, the same hollow eyes. But this time it wasn't just a reflection. It was alive. "She is mine," the reflection hissed, its voice echoing through Paul's skull. "You can never save her. You can never escape." The road ahead seemed to warp, the shadows closing in from all directions. Paul felt the weight of the world press down on him, his breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. He looked at Lily once more. Her eyes were empty, lifeless. The warmth that had once been in them, gone. And in that moment, Paul realized the horrifying truth. Lily wasn't just lost. She was already claimed. She had always been claimed. And now, there was nothing left to save. The road ahead of Paul twisted in unnatural ways, the very fabric of reality beginning to tear apart with every step. He felt like he was walking on a thin layer of glass, the slightest movement threatening to send him crashing into some unfathomable abyss. The world itself was unraveling, piece by piece, with the night folding into itself, consuming him whole. Lily's figure stood at the far end of the road, motionless, her vacant eyes staring ahead as if she could no longer see him. Or maybe, in some twisted way, she could see something he couldn't. A deeper, darker presence. Paul wanted to scream. He wanted to run to her, pull her into his arms and tell her everything would be all right. But the road beneath him trembled. Each step he took seemed to weigh heavier, more suffocating. He felt the oppressive pull of the highway like the tightening of a noose, the cold grip of something ancient and vengeful wrapping around his soul. He took another step forward, desperate to reach her. "Lily!" His voice echoed through the silence, but it was swallowed up by the thick, inky blackness that enveloped them both. There was no answer, no movement, just the distant sound of something watching. Paul's stomach twisted. The familiar feeling of dread washed over him again, flooding his senses. Something was wrong, more wrong than ever before. And then it hit him. The reflection. The twisted, malevolent version of himself. It wasn't just a warning. It was a harbinger. The thing had been telling him the truth. Lily was lost, consumed by this road, and now Paul was bound to it. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how fast he ran, he could never escape. This highway was its own entity, alive, breathing, and constantly shifting, waiting for someone to step onto it. And once you did, you never left. Paul stopped dead in his tracks. He could feel the ground beneath him shift again. He couldn't move forward. He couldn't move back. He was trapped. The air thickened, suffocating him, as a low hum began to reverberate through the ground. It wasn't the wind or the hum of machinery, it was something primal, something that existed long before human voices and long after they would be gone. The highway was calling. It was pulling at his soul, wrapping around him, binding him to it, just like it had bound Lily. But there was something more, a presence, A force, something standing at the edge of his perception, watching, waiting. He turned sharply, his heart pounding in his chest. The reflection was back. This time, it wasn't just a twisted version of himself. It had taken shape, becoming something more tangible, more solid. It stood at the edge of the road, its eyes glowing in the dark, the same familiar, mocking grin stretched across its face. "You can't escape." The voice was low, laced with a sickening echo, as if it came from far beneath the ground. Paul felt his knees weaken, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The reflection's eyes bored into his, the hollow emptiness in them making him feel as though he were staring into the depths of his own soul. "You've come too far now." The reflection continued, its voice shifting, growing more dissonant, like the hum of 1,000 broken voices. "This road is yours as much as it is hers." Lily's vacant gaze never shifted. She remained still, her form blending with the shadows. Her face, though eerily still, seemed to flicker, as though trapped in some other place, some other time, beyond his reach. "She is a part of this." The reflection's voice cut through him like a blade. "She was always meant to be here. You were too." Paul's mind screamed for him to break free, to run. But the words weighed heavily on him, like chains around his feet. They had all come for the road, whether they knew it or not. The dark, cursed stretch of asphalt had been waiting for them, and now it would claim them both. He staggered back, his body trembling with fear, but the road kept pulling him in, pulling him closer to the darkness. "No," Paul shouted, shaking his head. "I'm not like you." But the reflection only smiled wider, its grin impossibly large, its eyes gleaming with malicious joy. "You think you're different?" it asked, the tone shifting, almost pitying. "We are all the same, you and I. You wanted to save her. You thought you could rescue her from this place, but you've only brought her closer to me." The air grew colder, and Paul felt a chill seeping into his bones, settling deep into the marrow of his being. The ground around him began to crack once more, large fissures opening up in the asphalt, black tendrils of smoke rising from the gaps, coiling like serpents. Lily's figure was still unmoving, but something about her presence shifted. The darkness that surrounded her seemed to deepen, to thicken, until it seemed to reach out with a life of its own. The reflection's laugh rang out, hollow and cruel, echoing off the walls of Paul's mind. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The laugh persisted, vibrating through the very core of his being, twisting his thoughts. "You've made your choice," it said, its voice now a venomous hiss. "There's no turning back. Once you've stepped into the darkness, you cannot leave." Paul's thoughts became a jumble, a frantic mess of conflicting emotions. He couldn't give up on Lily. He wouldn't. But the road, this cursed highway, was everywhere now, wrapping around him, tightening, suffocating him. "You'll stay with us forever." The reflection's voice was now a whisper, a terrible promise. In the dark, and just like that, the world shifted again. Paul felt his body jerk forward, as if the very ground had yanked him closer. His vision blurred as the road stretched out into infinity, the night swallowing everything in its path. There was no escape. There was only the highway, and it was waiting. The road stretched endlessly before Paul, a never-ending ribbon of darkness twisting through the black void. Every step he took felt heavier, as if the very ground was pulling him downward, dragging him deeper into the nightmarish reality that surrounded him. His chest tightened with every breath. His mind screamed for release, but there was no way out. Only the oppressive weight of the road, the highway that would never let him go. Lily was still there, her silhouette a mere shadow at the edge of his vision, unmoving, as though she was not a part of the living world anymore, but a ghost bound to this place by some twisted fate. A low hum echoed through the night, vibrating in his skull, a constant reminder of the entity that lurked beneath the asphalt, watching, waiting, feeding off their fear. Paul tried to move toward her again, but something stopped him. Something held him in place. His body froze, as though the road itself had reached up to ensnare him, keeping him tethered to this place, preventing him from moving forward. The reflection appeared again, stepping out of the darkness as if it had been waiting for him. Its eyes glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire, its smile mocking. "You're still trying to save her." The reflection's voice echoed, hollow and dissonant, the words crawling under Paul's skin. "But you can't. You never could." Paul's hands trembled at his sides. The anger inside him flared up like a sudden storm, pushing back against the dread that had been slowly consuming him. "No, I won't give up on her." He ground the words out through clenched teeth. The reflection's eyes seemed to gleam with amusement, like it was enjoying this futile struggle. "It's too late for you both." The reflection stepped closer, its form flickering and warping like a mirage in the heat. "This road doesn't let go." Paul shook his head, trying to break free from the paralyzing fear that gripped him. He wanted to shout at the reflection, to demand answers, but his throat constricted, his voice a strangled whisper. Lily's stillness was unnerving. She hadn't moved a single inch. Her eyes, vacant and unblinking, stared into the distance, beyond Paul, beyond this world. "Lily, please?" Paul whispered, his heart aching as he reached out for her. "Come back to me." But the road only responded with silence, and in the silence, he heard the whispering, the murmurs that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. "She's gone." The words slithered into his mind, cold and unforgiving, like a blade slicing through his thoughts. His chest tightened as if the very air had thickened, making it harder to breathe. "She's gone, Paul. She was always meant to be part of the road." The reflection's voice deepened, almost a growl now, reverberating with a terrible finality. "And you're next." Paul staggered backward, his mind racing. His body refused to move, to fight. Was the highway alive? Had it claimed them both long ago, pulling them into its fold, trapping them in its endless cycle of torment and despair? The hum grew louder, vibrating through his bones, each pulse sending waves of pain through his skull. The reflection's shape flickered again, its body twisting and warping like smoke in the wind. "You think you can leave? That you can escape me?" The reflection's voice twisted into a distorted growl, an animalistic sound that made the very air feel oppressive. "You can't. We're all a part of this now, and it will never let you go." The ground beneath Paul's feet cracked open, a deep, yawning chasm revealing a darkness so deep it seemed to swallow the light itself. From the cracks, something began to emerge. It was a figure. No, multiple figures rising up from the void. Their forms were indistinct, blurry, like shadows that moved with purpose. They had no faces, no identity, only the void in which they were born. And then he saw them, the faces of the lost. Lily's face was among them, but it wasn't the Lily he knew. It was twisted, corrupted by the road, her eyes empty, her mouth agape in a silent scream. She reached out toward him, but her form flickered and faded, like a ghost slipping back into the ether. The other faces were the same, people who had once been alive, once had names, once had futures. Now they were nothing but shades, bound to the highway, lost to its dark, insatiable hunger. "This is where you belong." The reflection's voice now sounded more like 1,000 voices, whispering, pleading, screaming. "You'll never be free of it. None of us ever are." Paul felt the cold fingers of despair grip his heart. He didn't want to accept it. He didn't want to believe that there was no way out. But the road, was all-encompassing, swallowing him, drowning him in its endless darkness. He could feel it now, the weight of the highway pressing in on him from all sides, wrapping around his very soul, binding him to its will. And then, in that moment of hopelessness, he understood. The road didn't just consume the living. It consumed hope. It drained the will to fight, the desire to escape, until all that remained was an empty, hollow shell. There was no salvation, no redemption, only the road, only the highway. The reflection grinned, its smile grotesque and wide, as if it had been waiting for Paul to finally understand. And in the distance, Lily's figure faded completely, swallowed by the ever-expanding darkness of the highway. The road was still there, but Paul felt it now, more than ever. The weight of it, of the highway. The endless stretch of asphalt that lay beneath his feet, pressed down on him with an unrelenting force. It wasn't just a path anymore. It was a living thing, and it was hungry. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of something ancient and rotting, and as Paul tried to move, the ground beneath him seemed to pull, dragging at his heels as if unwilling to let him go. He wanted to scream. He wanted to rage against the emptiness that surrounded him, but the words were trapped in his throat, the air too thick to breathe, too suffocating. Every step he took felt as though he was sinking into the earth itself, his feet sinking deeper with every attempt to move forward. And yet, he couldn't stop. Paul looked around, his gaze darting from side to side, but all he saw was the same unbroken stretch of highway, vanishing into the distance. There was no turning back, no escape. Just the endless path that wound its way through the darkness, like the twisting coils of some monstrous serpent. The reflection had said he would never leave. But Paul didn't want to believe it. He couldn't. Not after everything they'd been through. Not after everything he had lost. He forced himself to take another step, his heart pounding in his chest, each beat feeling like it might be his last. Lily. Her name escaped his lips as a breathless whisper, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Where was she? What had happened to her? He could still see her face in his mind, twisted, corrupted by the road. But even that image was fading now, slipping further and further away, until it was just another ghostly shadow lost to the dark. But then, just as he thought he might lose her forever, he heard it. A faint sound, a whisper, a voice, distant and soft, like the wind carrying a secret. Paul. He froze, his body tensing, every muscle straining with the hope that he wasn't imagining it, that it wasn't just the road playing tricks on him. The voice came again, clearer this time, but still faint, as if it was far away, caught between two worlds. Paul. It was Lily. He was sure of it. He forced himself to move, his legs shaking, his feet dragging through the thickening fog that seemed to rise from the cracks in the road. Each step felt like a battle, as though the very ground was trying to swallow him whole. But he couldn't stop. Not now. The voice called out again, closer this time, but still not enough to touch him. Help me. He stumbled forward, faster now, his pulse racing as he followed the sound of her voice. The darkness around him thickened, closing in like a living thing, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Then, in the distance, he saw something. A faint light, glowing like a tiny star in the overwhelming blackness of the highway. It was Lily. He could see her, standing at the edge of the road, her form barely visible, a shadow in the night. She was reaching toward him, her hand outstretched, as if she was trying to pull him back from the abyss. Lily! He shouted, his voice raw with desperation. But the sound was swallowed by the oppressive silence around him. It felt as though the very air itself was trying to suffocate his cries. She didn't move. She just stood there, staring at him with those vacant eyes, her body unmoving as though frozen in time. The darkness around her seemed to grow, swallowing her figure bit by bit, like a tide pulling her into an endless sea. He stumbled toward her, every step an effort, every breath a battle against the crushing weight of despair that threatened to consume him. The voice came again, faint but clear. Don't come any closer. It wasn't Lily's voice anymore. Paul's heart stopped. It was the road. The sound wasn't just a voice. It was a warning. A final plea from the darkness, trying to stop him from reaching the thing he loved, from saving her from the clutches of the highway. He stopped in his tracks, fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. Was this really her? Or was this just another trick of the road? The shadows surrounding Lily seemed to deepen, coiling around her, constricting, squeezing the life out of her form. It was as though the darkness was feeding on her, drawing her back into itself, pulling her further into its grasp. "No, Lily, I won't let you go." He pushed forward again, but the ground beneath him cracked, and the highway seemed to fight back, the very earth rumbling beneath his feet as if trying to shake him off. The road wanted him to turn back, wanted him to give up. But Paul couldn't. Not now. He reached out his hand, his fingers trembling, stretching toward Lily's form, but as he did, the darkness around her surged forward, swallowing her whole in an instant. "Lily!" His scream tore through the air, but it was too late. The road had claimed her, and now it was coming for him. The world seemed to crumble around Paul as he stood in the suffocating darkness. The highway, now an unrecognizable stretch of twisted asphalt and shifting shadows, pulled at him, urging him to turn away. Every inch of the road screamed for him to leave, to forget, to abandon the search. But he couldn't. Not now. Not after everything. Lily. Her face, her voice, the way she had called out to him. Was it a trick? Was she really lost to the road? Or had it just consumed her, twisted her into something else? The uncertainty gnawed at his insides like a hungry beast, devouring his resolve. He wanted to run, to escape, but something held him in place. A force, unseen yet undeniable, tethered him to this place. He swallowed hard, his throat dry and tight. His breath came in shallow gasps, his heart pounding in his chest. The air around him was thick with something unnatural, something ancient and oppressive. The darkness seemed to close in on him from every side, a weight pressing down on his shoulders, making each step feel like it was dragging him deeper into some unseen abyss. The road stretched endlessly before him, twisting and turning in ways that didn't make sense, each bend a new mystery, a new terror. But he couldn't stop moving. Not now. Not when he was so close to finding the truth, so close to rescuing Lily, or what was left of her. He moved forward, his feet dragging, as though the road itself was trying to pull him back, to drag him into the depths of its twisted maze. The asphalt felt alive, pulsing beneath his shoes, as if the road itself was a living entity, breathing, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the night. Faint at first, but then louder, closer. Paul froze, his heart leaping into his throat. Was it Lily? Was she coming back? But as the footsteps grew louder, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. There was something wrong about them. They weren't the sound of someone running toward him. They were methodical, slow, deliberate, like the steps of something that wasn't quite human. His pulse quickened as the footsteps grew nearer, and before he could react, a figure stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't Lily. The figure stood tall and imposing, its form barely visible in the darkness, but there was no mistaking the way it moved. There was no warmth to its presence, no humanity in the way it shifted, just cold, mechanical precision. Paul could feel its eyes on him, though he couldn't see them. But the weight of its gaze was enough to freeze him in place, his feet unwilling to move. The figure took another step forward, and Paul's breath hitched in his chest. There was something wrong about it. The figure didn't have a face. At least, not one that he could see. Its features were obscured, hidden beneath a cloak of shadow, but there was no mistaking the sense of dread it brought with it. It was the road. The realization hit Paul like a punch to the gut. The figure wasn't just some random traveler, some lost soul trapped on the highway. It was the road itself, a manifestation of everything this place had taken, everything it had consumed. The figure raised a hand, its long, slender fingers stretching toward Paul like tendrils of darkness reaching for his soul. A cold shiver ran down his spine, and for a moment he thought he might collapse. The fear threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced himself to remain standing, to stay focused. The figure took another step forward, and then, to Paul's horror, it spoke. "You should not have come here." Its voice was like gravel grinding against metal, low and guttural. It wasn't a voice at all, really, more like a sound. A vibration that rattled the very air around them. The words weren't meant to comfort, but to command, to strip away any illusion of safety. Paul's breath caught in his throat. The road knew him. It had been watching him. It had been following him all along, waiting for him to get this far. Waiting for him to reach this point of no return. Turn back. While you still can. The words echoed in Paul's mind, reverberating through the very core of his being. His hands trembled at his sides, his body frozen in place. He had felt it before. The sense that the highway was more than just a path. It was alive, conscious, and it had been leading him here, to this moment, for a reason. But Paul couldn't turn back. He wouldn't. "I'm not leaving, not without her." The figure remained silent for a long moment, its form shifting, almost imperceptible in the thickening shadows. Then, with an unsettling calm, it spoke again. "Then you will become one with the road." The ground beneath Paul's feet trembled, and for a split second, he thought he saw the highway itself ripple like water. The asphalt seemed to twist and curl, as though it were alive, a living organism, and the earth beneath it groaned in protest. Paul's pulse raced. What did it mean? Had he been too late? Was Lily already lost beyond reach? He didn't have time to dwell on it. The figure stepped forward once more, its shadow stretching long and ominous, and Paul felt an overwhelming sense of danger. This wasn't just a man, a traveler. This was something older, something far darker than he could ever have imagined. The figure's hand shot forward, and in that moment, the air around Paul grew colder. The shadows seemed to close in, and Paul felt himself being drawn in, his feet lifting off the ground as if the road itself was pulling him toward the figure. No. With every ounce of strength, Paul dug his feet into the ground, forcing himself to stand his ground. He wasn't going to be consumed. Not like this. Not without a fight. But as the figure's hand reached closer, Paul felt the final crushing weight of the road's pull. He could feel himself slipping, his body swaying toward the dark figure, drawn in like a moth to a flame. And then, just when it felt like the darkness would swallow him whole, a voice. Paul. It was Lily. Her voice, raw and desperate, cut through the suffocating silence like a blade. The figure froze, its hand halting mid-air, and Paul's heart skipped a beat. Her voice was faint, but it was there. She was still alive. She was still fighting. "Lily," Paul shouted, his voice breaking the thick tension in the air. The figure's form wavered, flickering like a fading light. But it didn't vanish. It just paused, watching. "You cannot save her. Not now." The road wasn't done with him yet. The figure loomed over him, its presence a cold, suffocating weight pressing down on Paul's chest. The road itself seemed to recoil from his desperation, its surface crackling like dry earth underfoot. Lily's voice was still echoing in his mind, a faint cry that spurred him into action. But every step forward was like walking through molasses, slow, grinding, and heavy. He could feel the weight of the figure's words sinking into him. "You cannot save her. Not now." The road knew something he didn't. It had watched him, guided him, lured him in with promises of truth and redemption. And now, with Lily's voice barely a whisper in his ears, Paul wondered if it had all been a lie. "No," Paul cried, gritting his teeth, summoning every ounce of will he had left. He couldn't let the road win. He couldn't let it swallow her. Swallow him, too. His feet sank deeper into the asphalt, the road clinging to his shoes, its pull becoming stronger with each step he took. His mind raced as he tried to figure out what to do. But everything about this place was wrong. The air was thick with dread, the shadows twisted unnaturally, and the world itself seemed to be folding in on him. The figure, this manifestation of the road itself, stood unmoving, but its presence was like an impenetrable wall. Every time Paul tried to step around it, the shadows seemed to shift, closing him in, making the road stretch longer and longer in front of him. The distance to the horizon seemed to warp, and his mind screamed in confusion. Where was Lily? Lily! Paul shouted again, but this time, the road seemed to swallow the sound before it could reach her. The figure in front of him stepped closer, its hand outstretched, impossibly long fingers reaching toward him, like claws of a beast ready to tear him apart. "You're too late," the figure said, its voice like nails scraping on stone. Grating and bitter. "She's already won with us?" "No," Paul whispered, shaking his head. His throat burned. His mind fogged with the suffocating weight of the truth he didn't want to hear. "No, I won't let you take her." For the briefest moment, the shadows seemed to ripple, flickering like a dying candle's flame, and then her voice, Paul. This time it was stronger. Lily's voice. It was weak, but real. He couldn't mistake it. "Lily!" he shouted, his chest tightening with a renewed sense of hope. She was still here. She was still somewhere in this nightmare. But the road didn't care. The figure's hand, now closer than ever, was moving toward him, its long, twisted fingers curling as if to crush him. A cold, seeping chill spread through Paul's body, creeping into his bones. He could feel the tendrils of the road curling up his legs, trying to bind him in place, to trap him in its unyielding grasp. He couldn't let it happen. He wouldn't. His gaze shot up, and for the first time he noticed something. The road. The endless black ribbon of asphalt beneath him, so smooth, so undisturbed. But now, as his focus sharpened, he saw it for what it truly was. It was alive. The very earth beneath his feet was shifting, breathing, alive with a dark energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. The cracks in the road, the lines that had seemed so harmless before, now appeared as veins, dark and swollen, creeping across the surface like some malignant growth. The road had a pulse, and it was coming for him. A low, guttural rumble reverberated through the air. Paul's legs trembled beneath him as the road seemed to stretch, elongating and twisting around him, the shadows darkening and multiplying. The air grew colder, the chill sinking deep into his skin, gnawing at his bones. The figure's hand was inches from him now, the shadow of its fingers casting a long, twisted silhouette on the pavement. The figure's face, if it could even be called that, was nothing more than a void, a gaping hole where features should have been, a dark abyss that seemed to swallow all light, all hope. But in that void, Paul saw something, a flicker. Something small, but it was enough. It was Lily. Her image, distorted and faint, flickered at the edges of the darkness. She was there, but barely. She was being pulled in, just like him. The road was claiming her, just as it had claimed so many others. But not yet. Not if he could stop it. Paul's hand shot out, grabbing the nearest fragment of road that wasn't alive, a piece of broken asphalt jutting out from the surface. It was jagged, sharp, and in his panic, he didn't think. He swung it with all his strength at the figure's outstretched hand. The figure didn't react at first, but then the blow landed. There was a sickening crack, a sound like glass breaking, and the figure recoiled. The shadows surrounding it flickered violently, and for a moment, the road seemed to shudder. But it wasn't enough. The darkness surged forward again, faster this time, its grip on Paul tightening. His breath came in desperate gasps, his pulse a drumbeat in his ears as he struggled to free himself. His body felt like it was being torn apart, his limbs heavy and unwilling to move. "Please," he gasped, his voice breaking. And then, suddenly, the pressure lifted. The road's grip on him loosened, and Paul stumbled backward, gasping for air. What was happening? His eyes darted around. The road was shifting again, but this time it wasn't just the shadows. The asphalt was splitting open, cracking like dry earth. A low, rumbling sound echoed from deep within the earth, and Paul knew that something far darker, far more ancient, was awakening beneath the surface. And it was coming for him. The rumble from beneath the road intensified, growing louder with each passing second, reverberating through Paul's bones like the tremors of an impending earthquake. He could feel the ground beneath him beginning to split, the surface of the road cracking like an eggshell breaking under the pressure of an unseen force. Lily, her voice again, faint, almost drowned by the noise of the earth tearing apart beneath them. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was out there, somewhere, tangled in the same nightmare that had ensnared him. He had to find her, save her, or the road would claim them both. The figure, now more of a shapeless mass of shadows, recoiled slightly as the road trembled. The cracks in the asphalt deepened, as though something immense was trying to break free from the earth's depths. The figure's presence was growing stronger, filling the air with a sense of finality. It was the endgame. Paul's breath hitched as he glanced around, panic rising in his chest. There was nowhere to run. The road stretched endlessly in all directions, twisting and turning, an infinite expanse of asphalt that had no beginning and no end. No matter where he went, he'd be pulled back to this place, to this cursed path. And then, in the midst of the chaos, he saw it, the glimmer of light. It was distant, faint, but it pierced through the darkness like a sliver of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. Lily, her figure, barely visible but unmistakable, appeared at the edge of the shifting shadows. She was stumbling, trapped, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes as they met his. She was real. She was still here. And she was still in danger. Paul's heart pounded in his chest as he pushed himself forward, ignoring the road's tightening grip. Every step felt like wading through thick mud. But he fought against it with everything he had. Lily's voice, softer now, reached him again. "Paul, help me." He couldn't tell if it was a plea or a warning. The sound of the earth beneath him cracking like thunder only added to the pressure. The figure, the embodiment of the road itself, seemed to flicker with rage, its form warping and twisting with every movement. It wanted them both, wanted to pull them into the very heart of the highway, into its never-ending cycle of torment. Paul reached out, his hand grasping the empty air, but the closer he got to Lily, the farther she seemed to drift away. Was the road pulling her deeper? The earth trembled violently, and with a final, deafening crack, the ground beneath Paul's feet split open. A terrifying roar echoed from below, like the scream of a beast awakening from centuries of slumber. The ground trembled beneath him, the cracks widening, and the dark mass of shadows seemed to pull back, almost retreating in fear. It was as if the figure knew the end had come, that whatever had been locked beneath the earth was now free. And then the light, the faint glimmer, became brighter, closer. Lily's face was now clearer, her form struggling against the forces trying to drag her down into the abyss. She was alive, but barely. "Pal," she whispered again, her voice weak but full of desperation. "Please, save me." It was then that Paul realized the truth. The only way to save her, to save them both, was to face the source of the road's power. The very thing that had created this highway, this nightmare, had to be destroyed. But how? Without thinking, driven by instinct and a love that burned brighter than the fear gripping him. Paul lunged forward. He grabbed the broken fragment of asphalt in his hand, its jagged edge cutting into his palm, and raised it high. The figure, writhing in anger, hissed like a snake, its tendrils reaching for him, but it couldn't stop him now. With one last, desperate cry, Paul slammed the fragment into the earth. The ground exploded. A deafening sound of shattering stone and rending metal echoed through the air. The figure shrieked, its form unraveling, dissipating like smoke in the wind. The cracks in the road widened further, and the earth split open, revealing the true horror beneath: a mass of twisted roots and writhing black tendrils, something ancient and forgotten, pulsing with an unnatural, malevolent energy. The light, the same light that had drawn Paul and Lily here, flickered again, bright and strong, now blazing with a radiant intensity that pushed back the darkness, and from the depths of the fissure, a scream erupted. A sound so terrifying, so full of rage and hunger. It shook the very foundations of the world. But Paul didn't flinch. His body was shaking, his mind racing, but he held the shard of broken road firm, his hands steady as he drove it deep into the heart of the darkness. The roots recoiled in pain, the shadowy figure shuddering, and then, with a final, resounding crack, everything still. The earth trembled once more, but this time the tremors were different. They were the last gasps of a dying thing. The road, the highway that had claimed so many lives, began to recede. The darkness loosened its grip, and the oppressive weight lifted from Paul's chest. He looked around, his breath ragged, but for the first time, there was no figure looming over him, no monstrous presence lurking in the shadows, and there, standing in the distance, was Lily. Real. Alive. Her eyes met his, wide with disbelief, her face pale. But a smile began to tug at the corner of her lips. She was free. "We're free," she whispered, stepping forward, her voice trembling with relief. Paul took a step toward her, then another, until they were standing side by side. The road that had once stretched on endlessly in all directions was now shrinking, its surface breaking apart like sand slipping through an hourglass. The shadows faded, and the air, once thick with dread, was now crisp and clean. The highway was gone. They were free. But as Paul looked over at Lily, something deep in his chest tightened, a nagging feeling that wasn't quite fear, but unease. He wasn't sure how much of what they just experienced had been real, or if the road, the thing beneath it, was truly gone for good. Only time would tell. But for now, they were together, and the road was behind them.